Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Coach's Corner. I am Jeffrey David Hartford, your host and the coach. That's the conduit of optimism, altruism, consciousness, and health. And for any of you that have been following me for any length of time, you know that I have been meditating for several years now. In fact, we're probably closing in on about 10 years. And it's had a profound impact on my life. I took through COVID lockdown, especially. I took to journaling after my meditations. And before I realized it, I was 45 poems in from my meditations. And those led to what turned out to be 3 different books of mine that I call collections of meditative poems. And I am beyond thrilled to bring to you today a guest that I would have to credit as the source of much of that, because many of those meditations that I did were through the mindful movement meditation led by Sara Raymond, today's guest. Sara, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to have this opportunity.
Yes, likewise. There's something really special that technology gives us the opportunity to do, and back through that COVID time, especially through the lockdown when, my day to day, I'm a massage therapist now. My background is in personal training, and I've just been in that space for it's over 20 years. And I'm so used to being under the same roof with the people that I'm working with and helping and caring for. And during that window of time, it was wonderful to be able to be under the roof with my family, of course, but being stripped of that sense of purpose and what gives me that sense of fulfillment, I had to pivot. And I decided to do something that was well outside of my comfort zone and just start talking to the camera on my phone and upload them and hopefully have an impact on people. And that has really evolved to this. But during that time, being able to really do that deep soul searching inner work and, in a sense, if you will, battle my ego that had been holding me back. And, I wound up taking the course of going it alone. And I don't recommend that to everybody, but it did serve its purpose for me. But through that time, what I really thought about was, there's a common theme that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And interestingly, although during that time I was under the roof with just my family, it was just the 5 of us, I spent the most of my time with podcast guests and hosts that I was following at the time, and quite literally yourself and your guided meditations and the number of people out there, Wayne Dyer, Joe Dispenza, and so on. And I started to realize that we have so much more control over our day to day than we've been led to believe, and that we might want to accept the responsibility of. And it really changed the course of my life, and I'm so eternally grateful for it. And I really want to be able to give back and empower everybody else to take that same message. And I know now I'm about halfway through your book. Audience, I highly recommend you go get your hands on this, available on Amazon. You Are Not Broken. Beautiful, beautiful sentiment. And I was only about 20 pages in when I had already laughed a few times, cried a few times, and really felt connected to you, Sara. You've got a wonderful way about you, your energy, and the willingness to share your story, your vulnerability. So I guess with that, I'll throw it to you and say, what got you into the guided meditations, the hypnotherapy? What brought you there?
Well, thank you for that introduction and thank you for sharing your story. I definitely can relate to the experience around 2020. And, I also own a Pilates studio for the last 20 years. So I'm very familiar with that whole experience of being shut down and having to, be in the home without the typical day to day that you're used to. So I can relate to that. But specifically, what got me into meditation and hypnosis was really a journey of understanding myself on a deeper level. I was married and had kids very young, and I wouldn't change that for the world. And it also was an opportunity for me to just really dive into being a parent and a wife. And, in my early 20s, I that's when a lot of people are like figuring out who they are and, exploring and getting to know themselves. And I became a mom, and just that was my identity and my life. And as I said, I really love that about my life, but it didn't really give me an opportunity to slow down and figure out what's important to me, and what qualities I want to embody.
Mhm.
I just had to do what I had to do. Um, so in my early to mid 30s, I would say, I came to a point where I thought, well, did I even choose this path that I'm on? And there were a lot of things that I really enjoyed about my life and
Mhm.
wouldn't change, but I felt like I was just going through the motions because that's what I should be doing. And that's how I started practicing meditation. It was just really a way to look a little deeper, a little below the surface of who I am and what's important to me and what I want out of my life.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I can absolutely relate, especially with that sentiment of, did I choose this? You know, along the way, we almost, how would I say, it? In a sense, we lie to ourselves, that we're in control, we have this free will, we're making these decisions. But I often pull from Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, and he just draws that distinction between the conscious and subconscious. And,
Mhm.
95% of the time, the subconscious is in control, it's in charge. We're running these programs that we didn't have a say in installing in our system. There's,
Right.
from the third trimester that we're still in the womb until about 7, those programs are being installed by people that don't realize they're doing it. And far more often than not, they're trying to tell you what they believe is right for you while doing something entirely different that,
Mhm.
more often than not, that does not serve them. They're programmed from their parents, aunts, uncles, siblings, whomever. And it's just this vicious cycle that, I've heard this sentiment that when we heal ourselves, we quite literally heal our bloodline. And
Mhm.
when I heard that, it hit so deep with me that I feel that's my calling. I feel that's my purpose. And, I'm certainly not unique in that. There's many of us that is our calling, and we just need to learn how to do it. So I
Mhm.
think, in a sense, and it sounds like you did it similarly, we kind of had to go it alone and make our mistakes, and dig the trenches and go through trial and error. And some of that, it is not error. Getting married young, having children young, all that. I'm so grateful for my wife, my 3 kids, the life that we've created. But it certainly, that was my priority at that time. Although I was laying the foundation for my career path as a personal trainer turned massage therapist. But I
Mhm.
do have a sense that there's something more that I am called to do. And for the time being, it is conversations like this and sharing this information with people, with the intent of sharing the empowerment, sharing the information to get people to be able to do it. And for some people, this is kind of that intro. They might be intimidated by working one on one with somebody, but
Mhm.
I can certainly say firsthand what you personally are doing, and with your husband Les, the mindful movement, now the mindful movement podcast, and your new book that just came out in December. It's very, very powerful information that, for those of us that have the discipline and determination, if you're willing to put in the time and effort, this can make a difference in your life. But for those of you that do need a little more guidance, working with someone like Sara one on one, if you're in the area, we'll get to that stuff later in the conversation. But there's that role to play, right? Now, I know
Mhm.
your background also was in, you were a kindergarten teacher, the Pilates. If I remember correctly, there's some yoga involved there. So it's
Mhm.
really, in a sense, you're this Renaissance woman that's been able to pull from so many different things while being wife and mom and running the household and running the business and growing. And I absolutely love the story. I'll let you tell the details, but 2016 is when the mindful movement started. And it
Mhm.
started as this brainchild, if you will, of your child that was 10 years old at the time. I think that's
Yeah.
so beautiful. I love that you allowed him to be able to encourage you to do it. And your
Mm.
humility just said, yeah, sure. Hey, let's go and see. And here you are now, just shy of 1 million subscribers on
Mhm.
YouTube, which is just unbelievable. So I laid the groundwork with a lot of it, but tell us from your perspective how that all went down.
Yeah. Well, I always think, and still to this day, I think that my children are some of my greatest teachers,
Yes.
and I really, honor how they show up in our family and what they have to offer. And even as small children, my approach as a parent was to speak with them as people, right? Not the baby talk, and not that there's anything wrong with that. This is just my approach, and so I'm always open to. Well, I shouldn't say always. I try my best to be open to learning from my children. And at the time, I was new to working with clients one on one through hypnosis, and part of the process is to create a personalized recording for the clients and let them work with the recording so that they can have the new beliefs become more familiar and consistent, and the repetition is important. So, at the time I wasn't the best with technology, and trying to share large files through email doesn't work. And so we would use Dropbox, or we would use, other file sharing um, functions, but it was very like clunky, and people would lose them, or, they wouldn't be able to download them. And so my son said, well, why don't you put them on YouTube and just share a link? And I'm like, okay, how do I do that? So we sat in the kitchen. We had a family computer in the kitchen, and he said, "Let's open iMovie on the Mac, and I'll show you how to do it." And so he showed me how to make a video with an audio recording, and it was, I mean, it's very simple editing. It's just a still photo.
Hmm.
Um, I said, okay, well, now what do I do? He said, well, we have to get a YouTube channel. And, he walked me through the whole process, and he was very kind and patient about it. Um, you know, Kids with technology are so, it's just ingrained in their way of life that I was so slow about it. And he was like, just do this, 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 this. But he held my hand through the process. And then, people just started finding the videos, which is, how YouTube is designed. It's a search engine. It pushes content to the people that it thinks want to use it. I'm like, I didn't send this video to all these people. Who's watching this video? And then it just sort of spiraled from there. But I never expected it to be what it is today, but I'm absolutely very grateful, to have the opportunity to reach people in a way that it seems to be helpful for
For sure. I can vouch for that personally, absolutely. But
them.
I can't help but think as you spoke about it there, there's so much we can learn from that because really we need to have more humility when it comes to us being adults looking at children and stop trying to force views and thoughts upon them and allow them to think for themselves and more importantly allow ourselves to learn from them because they just intuitively have a sense with so much. I often think about, I just had a conversation with a client in the office this morning, trying to get back to being in touch with nature, literally touching the ground with our bare feet, exposing the nerve endings in our feet, the muscles in our feet to feeling the ground and getting out of these. A couple of the different barefoot companies refer to the regular shoes as these foot coffins, and they really just squish those toes together and we don't feel the ground. And you think back to how many children, when we put socks and shoes on, they instantly are ripping them off. They want to be barefoot. Or when it's cold outside and we have to protect them, so we bundle them up in 35,000 layers and they're letting us know I'm too hot. I don't need this. Take this off of me, but we force it. And there's just so
Mhm,
much there. I'm digging really deep into the quantum biology realm, which is quite literally just us getting back to nature and allowing nature to heal ourselves. And
mhm,
I tell you, there's really a sense that children just get it. They intuitively know. They know when they're hungry. They know when they're thirsty. They know when they're too hot. They're too cold. And boy, do they know they don't want those shoes on their feet, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's special. And for you to be able to defer to your son and think about what that turned into for you. And now, granted, again, not everybody is going to be able to create a couple of videos and put them on a YouTube channel and have the success you have. You have to have the content that has the value. But already had that. You were already doing these things with the
Mm,
people you were working with. But there's just so many lessons in that to me that no expectations whatsoever. And here you are closing in on 1 million subscribers. That's remarkable. I guess the pivot we'll take there. I am curious when it comes to your meditations. I mean, it's every single one of them seems just so planned out, detailed, start to finish. Whether it's a 10-minute one or an hour plus, they all just have that structure, that body. How do
mm,
you go about that? And is that something that you had some specific training in, or is that something that's come natural to you with your work?
mm. Definitely a little bit of both.
Mhm.
Excuse me. When I first started with the channel and with the recordings that I was making, um, I had already been practicing yoga and teaching yoga and meditation for some number of years, and then I went down the path of the hypnosis training, and that gave me a little bit just of a variety of approaches and methods to utilize. But in the beginning, a lot of it was content that I really personally needed, and so it was born out of like your story with your poems.
Mhm.
It was born out of my own practice and my own needs. So I was sort of imagining speaking to myself as um, a practitioner or a listener of the practices. And while I still do that, a lot of the content on the channel now that's newer is designed around work with clients. So,
Mm.
I ask a lot of questions when I'm working with people, and sometimes I'm very surprised at the answer of what they need to hear or what they want out of life. And so I will just, create a recording that would be as if I were speaking directly to one of my personal clients. And you know, people know what they want when they listen. They The stillness, the quiet, that's really wonderful time to get to know themselves and understand their values and their desires and the beliefs that they want to have about themselves. And that really becomes the the bulk of the content that I create these days.
That's brilliant. I love the simplicity of that, and it just makes so much sense. I found myself, I don't do it consistently, and I think based on you sharing that, I'm going to begin to. But the
Mhm.
number of clients that I've worked with in the clinic that, they need some corrective exercises, and I'll shoot a quick video and just text it to them directly. And periodically it'll be a little too long, and I realize, oh, I need to upload this to YouTube in private and share it to them that way. So it's being held somewhere because it's a longer one, but why not just edit it down and do it slightly more, I guess, generic so it can be for everybody, but
Yeah.
it's intended for that individual. That's a great
Yeah, I
concept.
mean, so many people out in the world have similar needs to the clients that you're working with. And, I know the clients in our Pilates studio that come in that they spend hours in front of the computer or like looking down at their smartphones or whatever it is that has them in a posture that's not necessarily ideal.
Mhm.
They all need whatever corrective exercises you're offering in your line of work as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. So I'm curious then in I always like to know the different education people get, different
Mhm.
certifications. So you've gone, as I touched upon, even the kindergarten teaching, which I love that because there's an aspect of taking this whole all-encompassing health, wellness, life coaching. If we can kind of bring that down to the level of children and
Mm,
help them establish good habits early on, then we don't have to play catch up when they become adults. So that's something I really see this whole space evolving into. But as you got your credentials in the Pilates, what did you go through the yoga? What did you go through in
mm,
the hypnosis? What did you go through for there?
sure. Well, way back in undergrad, there was my study was in psychology and early childhood education. And as I said, I had my first child pretty young, so I stayed home with her. And I thought eventually I was going to go back to teaching kindergarten, but just didn't happen. With the Pilates studio opening, that kind of changed my path.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so education wise, beyond the psychology and early childhood education, next was the Pilates certification. And I actually went through multiple different training.
Hmm.
I really am a learner at heart. I like to learn. I still work with lots of different courses at this point. Um, so I think I went through 3 full comprehensive programs before finally. Balance Body is the training educator that we host at our studio.
Okay.
So we do teacher training now there. Um, Yoga, I went through a 200-hour program. I don't know, more than a decade ago. I can't remember
Mm.
exactly how long ago. Um, and then meditation was another 200-hour meditation training. I did a local hypnosis training and then a further hypnotherapy training, and most recently was a master coaching program, um, and some somatic training and nervous system work as well.
I love it. Yeah, I'm right
It's
there
been a
with you.
lot.
And it's funny. I think back definitively when I was younger, it was driven more from that imposter syndrome. I just
Mm,
never felt like I was going to be good enough or smart enough. And, you know, I need more credentials to, get it to a point that people will believe me. And the reality is, more importantly, I needed to believe in myself because
hmm
everybody I turned to already was looking at me as an expert. I just didn't see myself that way. And I
mm,
still kind of take exception to the word expert. I'm just an ever evolving student that's curious, that wants to get better. And I've discovered the more I spend time getting the experiential knowledge, that just makes everything click from the semantic. Having
hmm
read it or heard it, that's one thing. And in class, geeking out about it was fun. But when you see it happen in the real world, still to this day, I'm over 10 years into my massage practice. And when I see somebody's body just respond and the tension melts away, I get giddy. I laugh at myself out loud, and I have to share it with them that I loved learning about it in school and thinking ahead of, wow, that would be really cool to be able to help somebody this way. But now to see it over and over and over, getting that experience makes the semantic knowledge so much more powerful. So I
yeah.
would imagine, each of the certifications you did get and going through with the yoga, the Pilates, the meditation, the hypnosis, all those different things, it's wonderful. The information they can provide you is great. And it gives you the credential in that sense of, okay, I'm real, I can do this. But the experience certainly evolves. How much would you say over the
Mm.
years it's evolved? And I would imagine to some extent it still is.
Absolutely. Uh, I think I 100% agree with the way that you described your experience, where it started with the imposter syndrome. I can completely relate to that. And then it continued evolving over the years of just learning from experience. Um, as I said, I work with teacher training or Pilates teachers in training
Mm-hmm.
very often, and a lot of times what I share with them is that in the beginning, it has to be a bit of imitation, right? You're hearing what your instructor is saying, and then you are repeating that. But the experience, like you said, is really where you fine tune. You you say something, and then the person in front of you does something that is not what you intended, and so you have to course correct, and you have to figure out, okay, how do I get this person in front of me, a real live human, to do what I'm asking them to do? How can I say it differently? How can I show it? How can I, use any hands-on corrections when appropriate, to be clear about what I'm trying to teach? And really only that can come from experience,
Yeah,
because I can say as an instructor the same thing 4 different ways, but if you're only receiving it in the one way, then the others don't matter, really.
for
So I
sure.
think experience is huge. And I would say that my teaching, my one-on-one work is still evolving, and it's all very, very much client centered. So meeting the person where they are, asking lots of questions to find out what they want and how they're interpreting what I'm saying is the only way that I can really help anyone, because it's not about me. It's not what I think. That doesn't really matter. I'm just a guide, or the word that you used was a conduit. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, that actually came to me. The whole acronym coach came to me from one of my meditations, and that was the title of my second book. And it's interesting that it feels like the ether was giving me permission to go out and do what I felt called to do. And being a conduit, feeling a sense of being a conduit allowed me to really jump right past the hurdle of imposter syndrome, because then I no
Mm,
longer felt like I needed to be the expert and I needed to reinvent the wheel. It was, listen, the information's there. You're learning it, you're experiencing it, you're interpreting it. Go out and share it. Don't worry
mhm.
about claiming it as your own. Let it be known. Be humble and give credit, and just spread the word. And that gave me such a sense of empowerment to say, hey, this is my path. This is how I will do it. And
Yeah,
it's been wonderful.
yeah, I
You
love
know,
that.
I think back from an experience as well. So I've been in the fitness industry well over 20 years now. We're closing in on 25 years now, and I had the experience early on in my career to do some bodybuilding shows. And as a trainer, I understood anatomy, physiology, the kinesiology, how to, origin, insertion, joint action of muscles, and how things are supposed to work. I could coach it and cue it. But what was interesting was, even with 3 bodybuilding shows under my belt, it was years later that I discovered I personally wasn't engaging my core properly. So my
Mm,
abdominal muscles weren't developing right. I didn't look quite right on stage from what I wanted. And what was interesting, the way that I realized this was, I have 3 herniated discs in my neck. And
ooh,
anytime I've been on a plane, every time we take off, I would always lean back against the seat and let the seat do the work. And my neck would still really hurt from that. And one takeoff, for no conscious reason, I didn't think of it. I just happened to engage my core and sit forward, and it was mid takeoff, and I felt zero pressure or pain in my neck. And I was able to move my head side to side, and I felt an engagement that I had never felt before. And I started to go down that path of playing around and just seeing what did I do there that I hadn't done previously. Even though I studied, again, that's taking that semantic knowledge. We can read a book and hear it from somebody else a million times, but
mhm,
until we've had that experience where it really clicks, then we're missing something. So it was interesting. In that moment, I was both excited and embarrassed. I thought to
mm,
myself, how could I be this far into my career and I didn't know this? But then I said, hey, it is what it is. Let it be a learning and a teachable moment. And I think sharing that with people and having that level of vulnerability is, it's something that people feel they can relate to. So I'm curious, in
mhm.
your practice, if you've had anything similar of understanding it intellectually, but then in your own practice, your own utilizing it for yourself, did something click at some point?
Mm. I think I get lots of little moments of clicking frequently, and I do think that it's primarily because I'm willing to be aware and curious about my experience. And when I find myself reacting in a way that's like, wait, what's this really about? That's when I learn something new about myself, or I um like something clicks in terms of what I am comfortable teaching or guiding someone else through, but maybe not willing to see myself, see about myself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I still work with professionals, I still work with coaches myself, and um I think that will hopefully never stop, because I will want to continue to be curious and learn about myself and continue the evolutionary process. And I think it's helpful to have an outside perspective of someone to help me see myself in a different way than I typically see myself.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think it's really important that people understand that. I recall sharing that when I was still just training and saying, as a trainer, sure, I know what to do and I'll get some good workouts in on my own, but there's not a single time that I've worked out with another trainer and not had a better workout. You work with
Hmm.
another professional that knows what they're doing. And some people, I don't know if it's still just ego or if it's just some sort of a defense mechanism. Maybe it is just money and they get defensive because they can't afford it but don't want to say it. I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like some people have an aversion to working with somebody else. And
Mm.
it's really important. I'm right there with you, whether it's different modalities. As a massage therapist, I'll still go get massaged, but I also regularly see either a chiropractor or an acupuncturist, different modalities to be able to learn from and improve my own well-being. I think
Hmm.
that's really important. And then the networking there. And I had a dear friend on the podcast yesterday that's a Jiva Mukti yoga instructor. He just spent the month of February in India going through a 300-hour program with that. So
Wow.
I'm really looking forward to getting into his class and experiencing that and all of those different things, being able to share our experiences and be able to be coachable,
Hmm.
right?
Well, I often will say that the resistance that someone has is something to work with,
Mm,
because there's a underlying reason why someone is resisting the help or the guidance from someone else, and often it's some form of protection.
yeah,
And that's a good place to start. If you're not ready to work with someone one on one or receive support from a professional, just start to look at what's below the surface of that. What could you potentially be protecting yourself from, whether it's thoughts, or what other people will think outside of yourself, or what you might be afraid or not ready to know or learn
sure.
about yourself as well.
That's such a great point. I really appreciate that approach to it and just thinking, as we're having this conversation and just sharing information back and forth with one another, thinking about the audience and how can they, as they're listening, be reflecting on some of this for themselves. And if they're not ready to work with somebody else, I wonder why. That's beautiful. And,
Hmm.
I've already mentioned it a couple of times, but your book is a great way too. I really liked how in the initial several pages, even just telling your backstory and as somebody who's just been a little more, having to be task oriented and getting the next thing done. And when's the next thing that's going to make me feel like I've made it? And,
Hmm.
being able to sit with that. And why do we feel that way? And I think that level of humility is so powerful in this, but then to turn and in a conversation like this, give the audience some different tools. So, you know, I guess that could be a great segue in when you're working with somebody. Is there a general outline we can give here that could kind of give the audience a little checklist to go through on their own to be able to say, okay, yes, I am ready to work with somebody. Where do I go? And what do I need to think
Mm.
about for myself? And I'm not quite ready yet, but I will do the work myself. Where do I start? You know?
Sure. That's a good question. I think the book is a good place to start because it's it's gentle and it's general,
Hmm.
and general enough where it can give you some tools to start to be curious and explore. There's this thing about yourself or this symptom or this experience that you're not wanting anymore. So
Yeah.
that's a good place to start, is figure out what it is that you want to change about yourself, if anything. And then from there, how I always say, how is it serving you? What is its role? What is its positive intention for you?
Yeah.
And then you have somewhere to go. It's like that's the entryway into the transformation, is what it is that you don't want, what you're aware of about yourself that you want to change. Um, and so it's a very gentle and general way to get started. And there's no pressure, no like urgency about the process that's offered in the book. You can do it at your own pace, and it's important not to rush the process or try to push um, to make it happen faster than it needs to happen,
Yeah, that's
right?
great.
And then beyond that, if you feel like you have further questions or you are stuck in the process, that's a good time to seek external support from, professional, or even maybe just having conversation with someone that you trust,
Hmm.
that won't push you, too far too fast.
Absolutely. Interesting. I think there's a third group we can put together because I find that those of us, if we want to use the general term healer,
Hmm.
I think about it from a perspective of I don't see any individual as being the healer for everybody else, but what they are is somebody who's discovered things about themselves that they needed to heal. And now they're sharing that with other people and they're guiding other people. And I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of us called for that rather than necessarily just doing our own work or recognizing we have work to do and going to work with a professional, some people feel called to go get the credential and do the work that way to
Hmm.
then be able to give back. And in the act of giving back, they're healing themselves and helping other people heal. I think that's a really powerful way to go about it as well, especially
Hmm.
if we're being honest about that and we recognize that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I do think that like the courses that I take nowadays seem to be, for me, that where I'm like, oh, I want to learn a little bit more about somatic, anxiety relief. And that's something that I think would be useful for me. So I go down the path of learning, applying it to myself, and then it becomes a skill that I can guide others through. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was certainly speaking from experience when I was referring to that. There's plenty that I've worked on myself. And yeah, many times it's just a matter of being able to share your story with somebody
Yeah.
and it gives them that sense of, oh, I'm not alone in this. I'm not being judged. You're sharing with me that you also have been working on this. And you mentioned something previously that really we should drive home is it serving you? There's a behavior we have that at one time we picked it up for a reason. It did serve us, it played a role. But at this stage, we recognize we have an experience that's on repeat in our life,
Hmm.
and this thing keeps happening to us. And if we have that victimhood mentality of why does this keep happening to me, well, it's going to continue to happen. But the moment you can stop and look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, what is it I'm doing that I can change? And then we make that change and we realize, oh, that behavior I picked up isn't serving me at this stage of life. So now that I've stopped it, interestingly, that experience stopped popping up. And that's
Hmm.
just so very powerful. And, that really is the underlying message I'm getting from your book, too, that just that concept, you're not broken. Whatever
Right.
it is about you that's pulling to you these circumstances, there might be something that you do need to change that is no longer serving you, but it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you can't
Hmm.
be fixed,
Hmm.
or you need to be fixed rather. It's
Right.
that's a powerful message. Um,
Yeah.
I, Unless you have something to add to that, there's two specific guided meditations that you've done that really impacted me. And I don't know if me just bringing them up this way, you'd instantly recall. You've done so many, but whether you can recall each of them or just by me bringing them up, they can push you down a path, maybe kind of tell some backstory on them. One was
Sure.
on self-love. And
Mm.
I have shared that with countless people because it hit me to my core. It had me crying in my
Mhm.
meditation, and it resonated so deeply in so many people that I work with, whether they're just friends and I don't see them in the clinic, or I work with them in the clinic and I feel that energy that they feel this block from loving themselves and they need this work. And it's been so powerful for me, and I've been sharing
Mm.
it. And the other one is the self healing. And you've got a couple of different versions of it, some a little bit shorter if we're crunched for time, and some quite a bit longer. And those have been
Mhm.
very, very powerful for me.
Yeah. Well, I do think that there are a lot of different practices on those two topics. They
Yeah.
seem to be um, two topics that are very needed in our culture today. So I'm not sure exactly which recordings you're referring to. I bet if you showed me the thumbnail, I could remember
Sure.
what the messages were. But I think that so much of what I share on the channel and when working with clients is around self-love and this message of recognizing that your worth is inherent, that you are enough as you are. It sounds, maybe because I talk about it so much, it feels like a bit of a cliche, but
Hmm.
I'm not sure everyone knows that, and I'm sure that most people have moments where they don't actually feel that way, whether they're labeling it or not.
Sure.
But I think that those are really important messages, and um, if I could implant beliefs into as many people as possible, it would be the inherent nature of your worth as a human, and the fact that you are enough as you are. So self-love and I think healing comes from those beliefs
Yes,
oftentimes.
I would agree. And, it's pull a little more from Bruce Lipton's work. He often talks about how every thought we have creates a chemical. And he, as a cell biologist, this really just makes sense. And when I hear him speak about it, it resonates. But, it's every thought we have creates a chemical. That chemical changes the chemistry of our blood. And our blood is the medium that our cells live in. And again, as a cell biologist, he's dealing with petri dishes and the different mediums in there. But that's so important that we see it that way, and that as such, we in the mind is the chemist of our body. And if we're putting in these seeds, these chemicals of doubt, of fear, of not
Hmm.
worthy, of not enough, that's what we're telling ourselves. And our cells are responding to that. So I remember specifically in the self healing one, you did mention, and this resonates so deep with me, this innate ability the human body has to heal. And if we can connect to that and we can see that and believe that, and now pulling from Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, when if we can think it and believe it, we have heart and mind coherence. Now it is so. The body just works that way. That's what the placebo effect is. And on the
Hmm.
flip side of that, if we don't realize we're doing it and we have these seeds of negativity, that's the nocebo effect, and the body's responding equally to that. So
Hmm.
it is really powerful. So I guess from that part, with the innate ability to heal, where is that something that you just feel in your gut, or is that something you've studied, or a little bit of both?
Definitely a little bit of both. I mean, I think a lot of the hypnotherapy training that I had spoke to the power of the mind, and the healing ability was really a big component of the hypnotherapy training. And I've seen it in action. I've felt it. I've witnessed it with my husband and so many clients over the years. So I'm a believer because I've seen it, and because I just innately feel it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I can totally relate, and I'll share with you a story that my audience has heard by now. I've told a handful of my guests, but we're closing in on a year now. Back last June, I was diagnosed with a tumor on my left kidney. And
Um,
because of all the work that I've been doing and because I've been in the industry for so long, my lifestyle has really changed quite a bit. And I know at this stage of my life, all of my daily actions, all of my decisions, all of my thoughts are geared toward becoming the best version of myself and healing. And it was really powerful. The moment I was given the diagnosis, I felt a palpable rush of energy from my feet through my entire body, and it culminated in a smile on my face.
mhm,
And I looked at my doctor. I said, Doc, I'm not going to be your average patient. I said, this is going to probably sound pretty crazy to you, but I'm not going standard of care. I don't want a biopsy. It doesn't matter to me whether it's malignant or benign. I don't need to know that. I know my body will heal this. And I've since had a very deep sense that this isn't my diagnosis. This is a diagnosis of a previous version of myself who has already died. He's already gone
mm,
because the actions that he was living daily, the thoughts that he was having daily, makes sense to me that that lifestyle would have created this. And
mhm,
I wasn't aware of the tumor prior to that because I had no symptoms. No, nothing really was coming up from it. and the timing was right. Now it was brought to my attention so I can be aware of it in my conscious awareness. And I feel this is part of my calling to help show people what the human body is capable of. Now, that's
Mm.
not me telling people that they should not go see a doctor and they should go my route. That isn't my message necessarily, but just to live by example and to be that person that's been able to show what we're capable of. So
Mm.
I
No,
guess
it's
I just wanted to
beautiful.
share that with you.
I think that the world needs more people like you to be the change. Yeah.
Yeah, I know in my heart we're all capable of it. And I just think since I was a little boy, I knew there was something I was supposed to do. And
Mm.
maybe this is it, maybe it's not, I don't know. But that was the sense I got. And it was very powerful in that moment that I actually, crazy as it sounds, I got excited with the diagnosis because I said, this is my opportunity. I'm already working on my next book and it's about this journey. And I've
Mm.
decided I'm going to write it to completion, with the conclusion being that the tumor has resolved prior to even getting that scan. So I'm writing my, reality into existence. And then the only thing I'll have to go back and
Mm.
add in is the date of that scan, and we'll make it
Yeah,
happen.
that's wonderful. It's such a therapeutic tool to write your experience and to um, write your future. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a strange thing to talk about because inevitably talking about it, especially in this capacity on a video that we're going to put out there and share with people, it's clearly me talking about myself, but it isn't from the place that I know as a child I would have done it. I was very egocentric as a child. And now it's very much from a place of being of service and trying
Mm.
to just lead by example and show people what we're capable of. So it's there's a part of me that feels conflicted talking about it, but the other part of me feels like I need to, and it feels very therapeutic to talk about it. And I just hope there's at least a handful of people that hear it and feel empowered by it, and I'm certain they can relate. And more importantly, hopefully they make changes before they get a diagnosis of their own. They don't wait for
Mm.
that, you know, fire under their backside to get them moving.
Yeah. Well, it's clear that the intention of your message is pure and well-meaning. So I think that that will come through.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a
Of
lot.
course.
So less about me, more about you. Through the mindful movement, are you guys still putting on retreats and such as well? I know you've got the Pilates studio still going on and all
Mhm.
that, but it seems like you've got so many things going on, and Les is running the podcast, right? So tell
Yes.
me more about where you guys are at in the vision that you see.
Sure. We do have a lot of things going on. We don't currently have any retreats, although we've definitely talked about it a lot. It's not either of our, I guess, strengths to be event planners. And
Sure,
so we would really need to hire someone outside of our very small two-person team to manage that and to help us host that. And at this point, we just don't have that person on our team.
sure,
Um, but yeah, so we just are offering everything, free on YouTube, on or on the podcast. We're on Spotify. We're on all different kinds of platforms. I think we have a still building catalog on Insight Timer. And then I work one on one virtually primarily.
hmm
Um, and then I teach at the studio, not a ton, but some. Um, and then the book. These are all the things that are going on, but we don't have any retreats, so
okay.
maybe in the future.
For sure. Yeah, when the time's right,
Yeah.
you want to make sure you're not spreading yourself too thin, and give each of the
Yeah.
things that you are doing the attention they deserve. Now, I know with the book you also self-published, which I can really
Mhm.
appreciate. That was the route that I went as well. Have you been able to do any sort of a signing tour, if you will,
Mm.
locally, or at least in the studio, have people come in and this nice release with it?
Yeah. We have not. I am new to book publishing. Of course, this is the first one and have
Sure.
not a lot of experience with the marketing process. I have, like you, been on a few podcasts. Just they've, podcast hosts have reached out to us, um, but I haven't done a whole lot of a book tour, if you will. But
Sure.
perhaps in the future, as you said, I have a lot on my plate, so it's
Yeah,
hard to do the traveling and all the things that would go into that process. But maybe down
absolutely.
the road.
Well, hopefully this just draws a little more awareness to it. We get some more
Yeah,
book sales for you and, in time. Because it was released in December doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to do some sort of a signing event later in the year and just put it out there. But you know,
sure.
I would like to say I wish I was capable in that marketing realm to be able to help you out because you deserve it, and I'd love to
Oh,
see this in more people's hands. But
thank
I
you.
can relate. I'm with you there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course, of course. Well, I tell you, I could talk to you all day for sure, but I don't want to keep you forever. How do people go about finding you? I know certainly we'll put the link, the Mindful Movement podcast. I'll put a link to the book. But if they wanted to work with you, how would they go about that? And how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. All of it is available on our website, themindfulmovement.com. Um, you can buy a hypnotherapy package or a coaching package if that's the one-on-one relationship is something that you're interested in, or I have a lot of self-led courses that are just short, powerful experiences to go through on your own,
Hmm,
or if anybody wants to take Pilates, I'm in Maryland.
that's great.
Yeah,
Excellent. Well, we'll certainly be sending people your way. We'll put your contact info up, and this was really great. I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you.
thank you. I appreciate you.
Of course, likewise. Audience, you know the drill by now. Thanks for sticking around. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And certainly head on over and check out the Mindful Movement. Till next time, have a blessed day.